Denver, Colorado, 1881. In the city's better rooms, men liked to believe they ran everything. They ran the rail schedules, the bank ledgers, the council meetings, the newspapers. They ran the law when it suited them, and they ran from it when it didn't. They ran their mouths most of all, bragging, bargaining, confessing. Mattie Silks did not try to run men. She ran the space between what they said in daylight and what they whispered after dark. Her house, quietly called Velvet House by the ones who understood discretion, stood in a neighborhood that pretended not to notice it. A line of lamps glowed behind heavy curtains. The porch boards were kept clean, the locks kept newer than the city liked. The place was not a spectacle. Mattie had no interest in loud business. Loud business invited loud trouble. On certain nights, when the wind rolled dust down Holiday Street and the street lamps flickered like tired eyes, women came to her back gate. They never came laughing. They came with their shoulders drawn tight, with hands that shook even when they tried to hide it. They came with bruises beneath sleeves, with a wedding band that felt like a shackle, with a voice that had been trained into silence. They came with nothing but a small bundle of clothing, a name they weren't sure they still deserved, and a question that made their throats burn. Is there any place left for me? Mattie's answer was never quick. A fast yes was cheap. A fast no was cruel. She listened first, because listening was how she separated the desperate from the dangerous, the broken from the manipulative, the lost from the lazy. And then, if she chose a woman, it was not because the woman was pretty. It was because the woman had survived a marriage that tried to erase her, and had decided not to disappear. Mattie's selection began in a room most clients never saw. Upstairs, beyond the public glow, there was a narrow office with a desk, a ledger, and a chair placed slightly too low. The chair was not an insult. It was a test. People who were used to dominating a room often noticed the chair immediately. People who had been dominated for years noticed it too, but for different reasons. One flinched from a bruise to pride. The other flinched from memory. On the desk sat a glass of water and a small plate with bread and salt. "Eat," Mattie would say, "then speak." Because hunger and fear made liars. And Mattie did not build her house with lies. On the first night, she decided to form something larger than a house, something like a cause. Ada, her manager, stood in the doorway and watched her sharpen a pencil with careful, almost tender focus. "You're recruiting again," Ada said. Mattie didn't look up. "I'm choosing," she corrected. Ada folded her arms. "The district girls will say you think you're better than them." Mattie's pencil paused. "I don't think I'm better," she said. "I think I'm responsible. There's a difference." "Responsible for what?" Ada asked. Mattie set the pencil down. "For what happens to women when men decide they own them," she replied, voice calm as stone. "For what happens when a woman leaves, and the city offers her only two choices, return to the cage or starve outside it." Ada's expression softened slightly, but her caution remained. "And your third choice is this?" Mattie's eyes lifted. "My third choice," she said, "is a door that locks from the inside." That night, the first knock came after midnight. Ada opened the back gate and led the woman upstairs. She was tall and thin, wrapped in a worn coat that had once belonged to a man. Her hair had been pinned back in a hurry and was coming loose in tired strands. Her lips were chapped. Her eyes were not wild. They were exhausted, like a candle that had burned too long and still refused to go out. Mattie gestured to the chair. "Sit." The woman sat with her spine straight, as if posture was the last piece of dignity she could still control. "What's your name?" Mattie asked. "Clara," the woman said. Then, after a pause, "Clara Dyer." Mattie's gaze sharpened. "Dyer?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Yes. Widow Dyer is my husband's mother, the one who stands at the fence and prays for other people's shame." Ada, listening from the hall, made a quiet sound, half surprise, half understanding. Mattie poured water and slid it across the desk. "Tell me what happened," she said. Clara took the glass with careful hands. "My husband," she began, voice flat, "never hit me. He didn't have the imagination. He did something worse. He laughed at me. Every day. Every time I spoke. Every time I tried to read. Every time I wanted something that wasn't his dinner. Mattie's face did not change, but her eyes narrowed with attention. He called me pretty when he wanted something, Clara continued. He called me stupid when I wanted anything. He kept the money, kept the keys, kept the friends. He kept my name like it was a joke. Why leave now? Mattie asked. Clara's fingers tightened on the glass. Because I woke up and realized I was waiting for him to die, she said quietly. And I hated what that made me. So I left before I became worse. Silence held the room for a beat, thick and honest. Mattie studied her the way a jeweler studies metal, looking not for shine but for strength. What can you do? Mattie asked. Clara blinked. I can manage a household, keep books, write letters. Can you read a man's mood before he speaks? Mattie asked. Clara's mouth tightened. When you live with someone who enjoys humiliating you, she said, you learn to read weather in a breath. Mattie nodded once. Good. Clara looked down. You're going to ask what I'm willing to do. Mattie's voice stayed even. I'm going to ask what you refuse to do, she replied. Because the only women I keep are women who still have a no. Clara's eyes lifted, surprised. I refuse to be laughed at again, she said. Mattie's faint smile appeared, small, sharp. Then you'll fit, she replied. When Clara left the office, Ada stepped in. That's your first? Ada murmured. Mattie opened her ledger. First of 4, she said. Maybe 5. Why them? Ada asked. Mattie wrote Clara's name in careful ink. Because she walked out of a quiet cruelty, she replied. Quiet cruelty is the most common kind. Women who escape it don't flee, they choose. And women who choose don't break easily. The second woman arrived 2 nights later, when the wind carried sleet and the porch rails shone with ice. Her name was Ruth Callahan. She came in a hat that was too fine for the back gate, and a coat that had been stitched and restitched at the elbows. Her cheeks were pale with cold, but her eyes were steady. She did not look around the room like a lost animal. She looked around like a person gathering information. When Mattie offered the chair, Ruth sat carefully, folding her hands in her lap, as if she had been trained to never take up too much space. You're educated, Mattie observed. Ruth's smile was small and bitter. My husband bought me education, she said, so I would sound impressive when he displayed me. Mattie waited. Ruth's voice tightened. He is a man who loves order, she said. Order in the house, order in my voice, order in my face. If my hair fell loose, he said I was careless. If I laughed too loud, he said I was vulgar. If I disagreed, he said I was ungrateful. Did he hit you? Ada asked softly from the hall, unable to stop herself. Ruth's gaze flicked toward the doorway. No, she said. He never needed to. He punished with embarrassment. He punished with silence. He punished with rules that changed depending on his mood. Mattie's eyes held Ruth's. Why leave? She asked. Ruth swallowed. Because he began to speak of children, she said. Not as love, as legacy, as proof, and I realized if I stayed, I would bring another person into his cage. I couldn't do it. Mattie felt something cold and sharp inside her chest, an old understanding. In Denver, motherhood was often used as rope. Ruth exhaled. I have no children, she added quickly, as if apologizing for her freedom. Mattie's voice remained calm. That isn't a shame, she said. It's an opening. Ruth blinked. Mattie leaned forward slightly. Tell me something true, she said. Tell me what you learned from him. Ruth's eyes hardened. I learned how to smile while I hated a room, she said. I learned how to speak to a man and make him believe he was brilliant. I learned how to keep secrets by never looking surprised. Mattie nodded, impressed despite herself. That, she said, is a skill Denver pays for. Ruth's shoulders loosened a fraction. And what do you pay? She asked, voice cautious. Mattie answered without hesitation. Safety, she said. A wage. A rule. No man touches what you don't allow. And another rule. You are never alone with a client you don't trust. Ruth stared, as if trying to decide whether this was kindness or a trap. Mattie's eyes did not blink. If you want pity, she said, you won't find it here. If you want respect, you will. Ruth's breath shook. I don't know how to live without rules, she admitted. Mattie's mouth curved faintly. Then we'll write better ones, she replied. When Ruth left the office, Ada stepped closer. She's refined, Ada said. Too refined for this work. Mattie closed her ledger. That's why I want her, she said. Men with influence don't seek pleasure. They seek permission to stop pretending. Ruth can give them that permission, and hear what they say when they exhale. Ada's brow furrowed. You're building a listening house. Mattie's gaze was distant. I'm building a shield, she corrected. For us. And, when needed, a blade. The third woman arrived with blood on her cuff. Her name was Elise Mercer, and she did not wait for Ada to open the gate. She pounded on it like she was trying to break a wall with her fists. When Ada pulled the gate inward, Elise stumbled through, breath ragged, eyes wide with something between fear and fury. Ada tried to take her coat, but Elise flinched hard. It's all right, Ada said gently. You're safe. Elise's voice came out raw. Don't touch me, she rasped. Then she seemed to hear herself and shook her head, shame flashing. I'm sorry. Mattie appeared at the top of the stairs, unhurried. She looked down at Elise and saw what mattered. The bruising along the jaw, the swelling at the wrist, the torn seam at the shoulder where fingers had grabbed too hard. Mattie did not ask questions on the stairs. She did not demand a story in public. She simply said, up. Elise followed like a person too tired to resist. In the office, Elise sat on the floor at first, her back against the wall, as if chairs belonged to people who weren't hunted. Mattie placed bread and salt near her without speaking, then sat at the desk and waited. Minutes passed. Elise's breathing slowed. Finally, Elise whispered, He said he'd kill me. Mattie's voice was quiet. Who? My husband, Elise said, eyes fixed on the wood grain. He drinks. He gambles. He comes home angry and says it's my fault the world is unfair. She swallowed. Tonight, he threw me into the stove. Not hard enough to burn me. Hard enough to scare me. Ada's breath caught in the hall. Mattie's expression stayed calm, but something in the room tightened, like a wire drawn taut. Why no children? Mattie asked carefully. Elise's laugh was broken. He said I was too useless to be a mother, she said. Then he said it was my fault I couldn't give him a son. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. I prayed for years, and then I realized maybe mercy was that I never brought a child into his hands. Mattie nodded once, understanding. Where is he now? She asked. Elise's shoulders rose. At Donnelly's saloon, she whispered. He'll come looking when he sobers up, or when he remembers he enjoys hunting. Mattie turned her head slightly toward Ada. Send Kavanaugh, she said, voice low. Ada's eyes widened. Now? Now, Mattie repeated. Ada hurried away. Elise stared. You can't fight him, she said, panic returning. He's a fool with fists, Mattie said. Fists are loud. Paper is louder. Elise blinked, confused. Mattie reached into a drawer and pulled out a small document, a simple statement, already prepared, with blank lines for names. You will sign this, she said. It states you are under my protection and that your husband has threatened your life. It will be witnessed by Deputy Marshal Kavanaugh. If your husband comes to my door, he will be arrested. If he tries to make a scene, he will be made an example." Elise's hands shook. Why would he be arrested? Men like him? Men like him are used by men above them, Mattie replied. And those men don't like noise near their investments. Elise looked at Mattie, something like hope and disbelief mixing. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Mattie's gaze held steady. "Because the first time a man hit me," she said quietly, "I learned the world expects a woman to endure it in silence. I did not endure it. I remembered, and I collected." Elise's throat bobbed. Tears finally came, silent, hot, furious. When Kavanaugh arrived, he signed the statement with a resigned grimace, as if he knew exactly what kind of trouble he'd stepped into. "You're piling up enemies, Mattie," he muttered. Mattie's smile was thin. "I'm piling up boundaries," she corrected again. Kavanaugh looked at Elise, then back at Mattie. "You sure about this one?" Mattie's eyes never left Elise's face. "She survived a man who wanted her afraid," she said. "Now she needs to learn what it feels like to be protected." Elise whispered, stunned. "I don't know how to repay you." Mattie answered simply. "Live," she said. The fourth woman came not with bruises, but with scandal clinging to her like smoke. Her name was Maribel Bell Rowan, and she arrived in a coat with fur at the collar and a dress that had been altered too many times to keep up with a life that kept changing direction. Belle was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, sharp, bright, dangerous. But Mattie did not invite her in for beauty. She invited her in because Belle's eyes had the look of someone who had watched men lie and learned to laugh without being fooled. In the office, Belle sat and crossed her legs like she owned the chair. Then she noticed the chair was low and smiled, amused rather than offended. "Clever," Belle said. "Most women try to make me feel small by raising themselves. You do it by lowering the seat." Mattie's gaze sharpened. "Do you want to be chosen?" she asked. "Or do you want to win an argument?" Belle's smile faded. Then she exhaled. "Fair," she admitted. Mattie poured water. "Speak." Belle's voice became quieter. "My husband is a merchant," she said. "Not a great one. He sells cheap fabric and expensive promises. He tells everyone I'm lucky he married me." Mattie waited. "He parades his affairs like trophies," Belle continued. "He brings women to parties and introduces them as friends. Then he comes home and expects me to be grateful he still returns." Her eyes flashed. "He never hit me either. He just made sure I knew I could be replaced." "Why leave?" Mattie asked. Belle's jaw tightened. "Because I realized," she said, "that if I stayed, I would become the kind of woman who believes she deserves it. And I refuse." Mattie studied her. "You're angry," she observed. Belle's laugh was sharp. "Yes," she said. "And I've had to hide it behind a smile for so long I'm afraid it's grown roots." Mattie leaned forward slightly. "Anger is useful," she said, "if it's controlled." Belle's eyes narrowed. "And if it isn't?" "Then it burns the wrong room," Mattie replied. Belle stared, then nodded slowly. "I can control it," she said. "I learned to control everything to survive him." Mattie asked the question she asked every woman she considered. "What do you refuse?" Belle didn't hesitate. "I refuse to be owned," she said. Then, softer, "I refuse to be made ashamed of wanting more." Mattie's mouth curved faintly. "Good," she said, "because wanting more is how you build." When Belle left the office, Ada stepped in, eyebrows lifted. "She's trouble," Ada warned. Mattie wrote Belle's name in the ledger anyway. "So am I," she replied. With 4 women chosen, Mattie did something she had never done before. She called them together in the downstairs sitting room on a Sunday afternoon, when the neighborhood was quiet and the city's respectable wives were at church pretending their husbands were faithful. The room smelled of tea and wood polish. The curtains were half drawn, letting in a thin winter sun. A chessboard sat untouched on the table. The place felt like a parlor in a respectable home, on purpose. Mattie wanted the women to feel the contrast. She wanted them to understand this was not a trap dressed as refuge. It was a new kind of room, built by choice. Clara sat stiffly at first, hands folded. Ruth sat with perfect posture, eyes attentive. Elise hovered near the wall until Ada guided her gently into a chair. Belle leaned back, watching everyone with a faint, guarded smile. Mattie stood near the fireplace, hands clasped behind her back. She did not pace. She did not posture. She spoke like a person offering terms, not salvation. "This is what I am not," Mattie began. "I am not a preacher. I am not a saint. I am not a man's fantasy." The women watched her, uncertain. "I run a house," Mattie continued. "But I don't run it the way people think. I don't sell women. I sell discretion. I sell silence. I sell time. Time where men feel safe enough to say the truth." Ruth's eyes sharpened. Clara's throat bobbed. Elise's hands tightened in her lap. Belle's smile faded into concentration. Mattie stepped closer to the table. "You are here because you understand men," she said. "Not because you love them. Not because you want them. Because you survived them." Elise flinched at the word survived. Mattie's voice softened slightly. "I won't lie to you," she said. "This work can be dangerous. Not because of what happens in a bedroom. Those rules are ours. Dangerous because men who confess don't like remembering they confessed." Belle's eyes narrowed. "So why do it?" she asked. Mattie's gaze met hers. "Because in this city," she said, "a woman without a name is a target. A woman with a name is a scandal. I intend to make your names useful." Clara's voice was quiet. "Useful to you?" she asked, suspicion creeping in. Mattie did not flinch from the accusation. "Useful to us," she corrected. "Because I am tired of women being disposable." Ruth swallowed. "What exactly are you asking?" Mattie held up a hand. "I'm not asking you to be girls," she said. "I'm asking you to be companions." She let the word settle. Companion. A word with dignity, with possibility. "You will learn conversation like a weapon," Mattie said. "You will learn when to smile and when not to. You will learn how to make a man feel seen without giving him ownership of you. You will learn how to leave a room before it turns unsafe." Elise's voice shook. "And if a man tries to hurt us?" Mattie's eyes cooled. "Then he will regret stepping into my house," she said. "Because my house remembers." Belle's brow lifted. "You mean you keep records?" Mattie's smile was small. "I keep truths," she replied. Silence held the room as each woman measured what she was being offered. Not romance, not rescue, but a kind of strategy. A life built on the thing they had been forced to learn, reading power. Finally, Clara spoke. "Why us?" she asked again, softer now. Mattie's voice remained steady. "Because none of you brought children into those marriages," she said. "That means you can disappear. That means you can reinvent. It also means the city won't pity you the way it pities mothers. The city is cruel to women who have nothing to prove they were once respectable." Ruth's mouth tightened. "So we prove something else," she said. Mattie nodded. "Exactly," she replied. "We prove we can matter anyway." Elise's eyes filled. "I'm afraid," she whispered. Mattie stepped toward her, stopping short of touch. "So am I," she admitted, surprising them. "But fear isn't a command, it's information." Belle exhaled slowly. "All right," she said. "What's the first lesson?" Mattie's gaze shifted over them, sharp and warm at once. "The first lesson," she said, "is this. Your past is not a stain. It is evidence, and you will not apologize for surviving it." Training them took months. Mattie was not gentle in the way of softness. She was gentle in the way of structure, by building rules that held when emotions failed. She taught them how to read a man's hands, the gambler's twitch, the drunk's clumsy grab. The politicians practiced restraint. She taught them how to guide a conversation the way a rider guides a horse, never yanking, always steering. She taught them which questions made men brag and which questions made them confess. Ada taught them the house's routines, bell signals, safe exits, how to keep each other in sight without looking like they were watching. Kavanaugh, bribed and coerced into cooperation, taught them the simplest truth about law in Denver. If you can't pay for justice, you must outlast injustice. Clara became the ledger's twin, quiet, precise, managing schedules and accounts like she had been born to it. For the first time, her intelligence was not mocked. It was relied upon. She wore darker dresses now, not to hide herself, but to move like a shadow through rooms that didn't deserve her brightness. Ruth became the voice. She could speak to bankers, to editors, to judges' wives, and make them feel like the room had improved because she was in it. She learned to offer comfort without surrendering control. Her smile became a tool she owned, not a mask she wore. Elise became the watcher. She sat near doorways, not from fear but from skill, noticing everything. The man who drank too fast, the man who avoided eye contact, the man who looked at a woman like an object. She learned that vigilance could be strength, not shame. Belle became the blade. Not the reckless kind, the precise kind. She could flirt with a man until he believed he was winning, then pivot a conversation so cleanly he didn't notice he'd revealed his weakness. When men tried to test her, she made them feel foolish without ever raising her voice. Together, they formed something Denver had never seen. A circle of women who did not compete for scraps. They shared information. They covered for each other. They agreed on boundaries and enforced them like law. Men noticed. At first, they came for novelty. Then they came for comfort. Then they came for something they could not admit they needed. To be understood without being judged, and to be controlled without feeling humiliated. That was Mattie's genius. She did not break men. She guided them into confessing, and then let them leave believing they had chosen it. And in their confessions, the city's hidden skeletons began to show. A railroad deal whispered too early. A judge's debt to a gambler. A councilman's mistress hidden in a rented room. A charity that was a laundering scheme. A newspaper editor paid in envelopes, not salaries. Mattie collected truths like other people collected land. And her women, her companions, became the unseen threads that held those truths together. The city did not accept this quietly. There were letters. Anonymous at first, then signed by men who believed signatures were weapons. There were inspections. There were sermons about fallen women, delivered by preachers whose hands shook with hypocrisy. There were husbands, ex-husbands, who came sniffing around the edges of Holiday Street like dogs that had lost their favorite cruelty. One night, Elise's husband appeared at the back gate. He was drunk and furious, his voice loud enough to wake the neighborhood. "Elise!" he shouted. "You come out! You belong to me!" Elise stood upstairs, hands trembling, watching through a curtain slit. Her stomach rolled with the old fear. Ada whispered, "Stay back." But Mattie did not hide. Mattie walked to the gate, coat buttoned, lantern in hand. The light carved her face in hard lines. "Leave," she said. The man laughed, spitting into the dirt. "Who are you?" he slurred. "You think you can keep my wife?" Mattie's voice was calm. "She isn't your wife anymore," she replied. "She's a woman who made a choice." His eyes narrowed, mean and stupid. "I paid for her," he said. Mattie's lantern lifted slightly, illuminating a second figure in the shadows. Deputy Marshal Kavanaugh, leaning against the fence post like boredom. "You threatened her life," Mattie said. "In front of witnesses." The drunk blinked. "What?" Kavanaugh pushed off the post. "Evening," he drawled. "You're under arrest." The man's bravado cracked. "For what?" "For being too loud near the wrong house," Kavanaugh replied, and snapped cuffs on his wrists. As the man was dragged away, Elise's breath shattered into a sob, relief so sharp it hurt. Mattie didn't look back up at the windows. She simply set the lantern down, closed the gate, and locked it from the inside. Upstairs, Ruth whispered, awed. You didn't raise your voice. Mattie's reply was quiet. Loud is what men do when they're losing, she said. Months passed, then a year. Denver grew. The rails expanded. The city pretended to be cleaner while stuffing more corruption into smaller rooms. Velvet House remained what it had always been, discreet, controlled, quietly powerful. And Mattie's companions began to matter in ways no one had predicted. Ruth was invited to charity dinners, not as a curiosity, but as a woman whose conversation soothed men with donations. Clara was consulted by businessmen who believed she was simply good with numbers, never realizing she understood their finances better than they did. Belle became a whispered name at political gatherings, a woman men sought when they needed advice without admitting they needed it. Elise, once hunted, became the quiet guardian of the house's safety, mentoring new women who arrived trembling at the gate. They never had children. That remained both a wound and a strange freedom. Sometimes, late at night, Clara would stare at the fire and say nothing, and the others would understand what she did not speak, the life that could have been if love had not been a cage. Ruth sometimes watched families in the street with a distant expression, then turned away as if the sight burned. Elise would hold a teacup with both hands like it was a fragile promise. Belle, who pretended not to care, once whispered, "Maybe it's mercy. Maybe it's loss. Maybe it's both." Mattie never offered false comfort. She offered reality, which was rarer. "You are not lesser for what you didn't have," she told them. "You are stronger for what you refused to bring into cruelty." Those words became a kind of scripture, one the city would never print, but the women carried anyway. The climax of their rise came not in a bedroom, but in a parlor full of powerful men. It was the night a councilman, newer than Reddick but just as hungry, arrived with a plan to push a morality ordinance that would grant police greater power to raid houses like Mattie's. He came with 2 businessmen and a reporter, expecting to intimidate her with numbers and public threat. Mattie welcomed them with tea and a warm lamp glow. Ruth sat beside her, composed. Clara stood near the desk with a ledger, not the black one, but a clean copy meant for polite eyes. Belle lounged near the curtains, listening. Elise stood near the door, calm as a sentinel. The councilman smiled as if he owned the room. "Miss Silks," he began, "we're offering you a chance to cooperate with the city's new direction." Mattie's voice was mild. "Denver has many directions," she said. "Most of them lead to money." The men chuckled, pleased by her apparent compliance. The councilman leaned forward. "If you agree to close within 60 days, we can ensure your assets are protected. Your workers can be relocated." Ruth's smile appeared, soft, elegant, terrifyingly polite. "Relocated where?" she asked. The councilman blinked, surprised to be questioned by a woman as if she were an equal. "To appropriate employment," he said. Belle's laugh was barely audible. "Appropriate for whom?" she murmured. The reporter's pen hovered. Mattie lifted her teacup, unhurried. "You came here to threaten me," she said, "but you made a mistake." The councilman's smile tightened. "And what mistake is that?" Mattie set the cup down. "You brought witnesses," she replied. Then she nodded to Clara. Clara opened the ledger copy and slid a page across the table. Names, dates, donations, property purchases, linked to the councilman's friends. Not accusations, not dramatic allegations, just facts arranged in a pattern that could not be ignored. The businessmen stiffened. The councilman's face paled. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. Ruth leaned forward slightly, her voice calm as water. "From men who talk when they feel safe," she said. Belle added, voice silk over steel. "You should have chosen a room where women don't listen." The reporter's eyes widened. His pen began to move quickly. Mattie's voice remained quiet. "If your ordinance passes," she said, "the city will learn what kind of men push it. If it fails, you will forget you ever had the idea. Either way, you will stop using morality as a club." The councilman's jaw trembled with anger. "You can't!" Mattie's gaze did not blink. "I can," she said, "because you came to my house, and my house remembers." For a moment, it looked like violence might erupt. Not from Mattie's side, but from men realizing they were cornered by women they had dismissed. Elise shifted her stance by the door, and the movement was subtle but clear. The exit was controlled. The businessman to the councilman's left cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should reconsider," he said quickly. The councilman stared at Mattie, hatred and fear mixing. Then he stood abruptly. "This conversation is over," he snapped. Mattie smiled faintly. "Yes," she said. "It is." They left without another word. The reporter followed, hungry for a story he could not fully print without destroying his own career. When the door closed, the sitting room felt suddenly lighter, as if the air itself had been holding its breath. Ruth exhaled slowly. We just," Belle said, amused and stunned. "Told the city no." Elise's hands shook, but this time it was not fear. It was adrenaline, the unfamiliar thrill of standing on the other side of power. Clara sank into a chair, whispering, "I can't believe they listened." Mattie looked at them, 4 women who had arrived at her gate as ghosts and were now standing like a council of their own. "They listened," Mattie said softly, "because you spoke." Ada stepped in from the hallway, eyes bright. "They're going to hate you," she whispered. Mattie's smile was small. "Let them," she replied. "Hate is proof we're no longer invisible." That spring, Denver held a charity gala for a new hospital wing, respectability wrapped in lace and champagne. Ruth received an invitation addressed to her by name. Clara was asked to consult on fundraising accounts. Belle was requested as a guest of honor by a businessman's wife who believed Belle's charm could attract donations. Elise, quiet Elise, was asked to oversee security arrangements because someone had heard she could read danger before it arrived. They looked at Mattie when the invitations came, uncertain. Mattie's voice was calm. "Go," she said. "Not to beg for a seat, to take it." The night of the gala, the 4 women stood under chandeliers instead of lamplight. They wore dresses chosen by themselves, not by husbands. They held their heads high. Men glanced, curious, cautious, drawn. And when those men spoke, they spoke differently, because they sensed something had shifted. A new kind of influence had entered the room, quiet as breath and sharp as ink. Later, after the gala, they returned to Velvet House and gathered in the downstairs sitting room, shoes removed, shoulders loosened, laughter finally real. It was not loud laughter. It was the kind that comes when a person realizes she has survived, and then realizes she might actually live. Elise stared at her hands and whispered, "I felt normal." Ruth shook her head, smiling. "Not normal," she corrected. "Respected." Clara swallowed. "I didn't know that feeling existed." Belle leaned back, eyes shining with something like wonder. "It does," she said, "when you stop asking permission." Mattie stood near the window, watching the street outside. The city continued. Wagons, lamps, men who thought they owned everything. But inside her house, something new held steady. A group, a cause, not a rebellion with banners, not a sermon, a system, a network. A quiet coalition of women who had been trained by cruelty and refined by choice. Ada approached Mattie, voice low. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Bringing them in? Taking on their stories?" Mattie's gaze stayed on the street lamps. "Their stories were already here," she said. "The city was built on them. I just refused to let them be wasted." Ada nodded slowly. "And what do you call what you've made?" Mattie's expression softened, just slightly, like a storm easing without fully leaving. "A door," she said. "A door women can walk through when the world tells them they have nowhere else to go." Behind her, the 4 companions were talking, planning, laughing, dreaming carefully. Their voices wove together like threads, stronger than any one strand alone. Outside, Denver remained loud and hungry. Inside, Velvet House remembered its purpose. Mattie Silks had chosen women the world tried to break, and together, they became the kind of presence the world could not ignore. The end. 2 weeks after Elise's husband was taken from the gate, the city tested Mattie in a more polite way. Polite being how powerful men sharpened their knives. A letter arrived on thick paper, sealed with red wax. Miss Silks, certain parties have expressed concern regarding your operations. I request a private conversation in the interest of public peace. Judge Horace Latham. Judge Latham's name could turn a complaint into a case, a raid into a ruin. He arrived that night with winter in his coat and certainty in his posture, stepping into the parlor as if it belonged to him already. Mattie met him without smiling. Ruth sat beside her, composed. Clara stood near the sideboard, attentive. Belle lingered in shadow. Elise remained near the hallway, present, calm, a quiet warning. The city is changing, Latham said, voice smooth. Denver aspires to civilization. Civilization is a costume, Mattie replied. Men wear it until it becomes inconvenient. Latham's smile thinned. Operate quietly. Limit your clientele. Donate to the right causes. You may avoid trouble. Ruth's voice was gentle and dangerous. And if we don't? Public decency will require action, he said. Belle spoke from the dim. Public decency has always required women to bleed quietly. Latham ignored her and fixed on Mattie. Be careful, he warned. You're building something that makes men nervous. Mattie's expression softened, almost kind. Men should be nervous, she said. They've been careless for centuries. For the first time, his composure cracked. He stood abruptly. This is your last courtesy, he said. Mattie rose as well, calm as a locked door. Then be sure to enjoy it, she replied. When he left, the room exhaled. Elise whispered, He'll come back. Yes, Mattie agreed. Not because he cares about morality, because he hates what we represent. Clara frowned. What do we represent? Mattie looked at each of them. 4 women who had arrived at her gate as ghosts, and were now learning to stand like a council of their own. A place women go when they stop accepting their lives, she said. Men can forgive sin. They cannot forgive refusal. Spring brought mud, and with it, a different kind of visitor. The wives, not the wives who pretended, the wives who knew. A woman in a conservative dress arrived with a basket of bread, as if calling on a neighbor. She gave Ada her name, and the hall went still. Mrs. Latham. In the parlor, she sat rigid, hands steady, eyes tired. I don't approve of your house, she began. Most people don't approve of what they use, Mattie replied. Mrs. Latham flinched, then whispered, My husband thinks he's protecting society. He's protecting control. He's terrified women will learn they can leave. Mattie leaned forward. Women already know, she said. They just need a door. Mrs. Latham's throat tightened. Then build something I can support without being ruined for it, she said. A charity, a committee, a polite name for an impolite truth. Ruth's eyes sparked. Clara nodded slowly, already counting. Belle smiled like she'd smelled blood in the water. Elise watched the windows, listening for footsteps. That month, the velvet circle appeared on paper. Teas, donations, employment training, hospital funds, respectable enough to be printed on the society page. Underneath, it was Mattie's network widened. Money flowed, information flowed, and women began to slip free of bad homes with fewer bruises and more options. On a late summer night, when rain finally returned to Denver and the streets shone dark as ink, the 4 companions gathered in the parlor after the last visitor left. Thunder rolled far off, tired and distant. The house smelled of wet wood and lamplight. Elise stared at the window where the rain ran in clean lines. For the first time, she whispered, I don't feel like prey. Ruth's smile was small. Not prey, she agreed. Witnesses. Clara held her teacup with both hands, steady now. I didn't know a life could be arranged, she said softly. Belle's eyes gleamed. "It can," she murmured, "if you stop asking permission." Mattie stood by the curtain, listening to the rain like it was a verdict. Then she turned to them, voice low and certain. "This is what we are," she said. "A door women can walk through when the world tells them they have nowhere else to go." Outside, the city stayed loud and hungry. Inside, the circle held, and the door locked from the inside. The end. In later years, men would tell the story wrong. They would say Mattie Silks built an empire on charm. They would say the women were ornaments, that the city stayed the same. But some nights, when a wife stepped through a back gate with her hands shaking and her chin lifted anyway, the truth continued, quiet, stubborn, and alive. And that was how Denver changed. Not with speeches, but with choices. Mattie knew power was never a crown. It was a key, and once a woman held it, she never forgot the feel of it in her palm. Behind velvet curtains, they learned to keep their names and their nerve.